Pennsylvania. A girl said the water tasted like old meat. Then the whole complex was evacuated. On the morning of June 3, 2025, in the rusted heart of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, a maintenance call was logged at the Briar Ridge Apartments, a quiet, low-income housing complex just off Route 222. The complaint was strange but not alarming, at least not at first. A 10-year-old girl named Maya Whitaker told her mother the tap water tasted like old meat. The smell, she said, reminded her of the freezer after the power went out last summer when the chicken went bad. Her mother, Danielle, dismissed it as nothing more than rusty pipes. But within the hour, other residents began reporting the same thing. Brownish water, a metallic rotting odor, a taste no one could quite describe. When the complex manager opened the rooftop water tank for inspection, he gagged. He staggered backwards so fast he nearly fell off the ladder. By noon, the Lancaster County Health Department had been called. Firefighters sealed the stairwells. Hazmat crews arrived in yellow suits. And by nightfall, every tenant in Briar Ridge was ordered to evacuate. No one understood what was happening. But Maya's words, the ones that started it all, would soon prove disturbingly accurate. Because what they found inside that tank was human. What they pulled from the rooftop would haunt the entire town. For Sam Delaney, the day began like any other. He had worked as a maintenance contractor at Briar Ridge for 3 years, patching drywall, resetting circuit breakers, unclogging toilets. It was not glamorous, but it was honest work. At 52, divorced and newly sober, Sam took pride in the quiet routine. That morning, when he got the call from the front office about a strange odor in the water, he assumed it was another decaying filter or some sediment backup. Lancaster's older infrastructure was notorious for its quirks. Still, the note scribbled by the leasing agent caught his eye. Multiple tenants reporting smell or taste of rotting meat and water started this morning. He grabbed a pair of gloves, his headlamp, and the large keyring labeled Tank Access, Roof. By 10:25 a.m., Sam was climbing the metal ladder bolted along the building's rear, his boots clanging against the rusted rungs. At the top, the sun beat down on the black tar roof, waves of heat shimmering off the shingles. The tank stood at the far end, cylindrical, corroded at the edges with peeling white paint. It was an older design, built for volume, not convenience. Sam unlatched the steel cover and pried it back with a grunt. Then he froze. What drifted out was not the typical staleness of stagnant water. It was thicker, meatier. He felt it before he fully smelled it. The odor clung to his face, coating his nostrils like grease. He retched instantly, dropping his headlamp with a metallic clatter onto the gravel. He tried to look again. Inside, murky water lapped gently against something floating. The object bumped the side of the tank as if nudged by an unseen hand. Sam blinked through the haze, squinting, trying to make sense of it. He saw strands of hair, dark, wet, matted. Then he saw skin. Not rubber, not cloth. Skin. Sam fell backward off the lip of the hatch and collapsed onto the roof, panting and sweating. He pressed his back to the shingles and stared at the sky bile rising in his throat. He knew exactly what he had seen. Not a mannequin, not a prank. He stumbled down the ladder with shaking limbs, nearly missing the bottom rung. His hands trembled as he fumbled with his phone, tapping in the number to building management. "Call 911, he said flatly. "There is a body in the water tank." The next 15 minutes were a blur. Fire trucks pulled in, then a hazmat van, then 2 unmarked police cars. Sam sat on the curb, head between his knees, dry heaving. A paramedic gave him water, but he could not drink it. He could not even look at the bottle. By noon, the entire building had been evacuated. Residents stood on the sidewalks, many barefoot, clutching children or dogs staring at their windows as if they had betrayed them. The health department ordered an immediate shut-off of all plumbing. The building was now a crime scene. As news spread through the community, reporters began to arrive. Cameras, questions, fear. Maya Whitaker. The little girl who had first spoken up was now huddled in her mother's arms, wrapped in a pink blanket. She kept asking one question. "Am I going to die? I drank that water." No one had an answer. Sam Delaney sat quietly in the back of an ambulance watching the activity unfold. His gloves were still in his lap. The stench was still in his throat. The image was still in his mind. Hair, skin, eyes maybe. Floating. All day Sam would try not to think about it. But that night, when he closed his eyes, he would see the lid of the tank slowly opening again, and what stared back from the dark water below. By 3:20 p.m. on June 3, 2025, Briar Ridge Apartments was no longer a residential complex. It had become a sealed perimeter. Police had erected yellow caution tape at every stairwell and entry door. Lancaster County Sheriff's deputies stood at each corner of the building blocking access. A command tent had been erected in the parking lot, its nylon flaps rustling in the breeze. What had started as a plumbing complaint was now a full-blown crime scene investigation. That evening, Detective Lydia Grant, a 14-year veteran with the Major Crimes Division, arrived at the scene. She stood on the gravel beside the building, staring up at the rooftop water tank. Her team had been briefed by phone on the discovery of a partial human body submerged in the main supply line with unknown time of death and no ID. The implications were disturbing. Every apartment in the complex 48 units had been unknowingly drawing from that water source. Showers, sinks, drinking water, ice machines. For how long, no one knew. Detective Grant turned to her lead forensic technician. "Do we know if it is just one body?" "We do not know anything yet, ma'am. Just that there is a torso and a face." Hazmat teams ascended the rooftop with extreme caution. In full suits, respirators and gloves, they hoisted the heavy tank lid open once more and began draining the contents into sealed biohazard drums. A thick, brown-black liquid spilled out. The stench of rot chemicals and decay drifted through the air like a warning. It took 3 hours to fully extract the remains. What they found inside was far worse than anyone expected. The body was incomplete. Limbs were missing. The lower half of the torso had been sawed through with what appeared to be a power tool based on jagged bone striations. The skull had a hairline fracture across the orbital ridge, possibly blunt force trauma. But it was the condition of the soft tissue that disturbed even the seasoned forensics team. The victim's face had been preserved unnaturally well, likely due to the cold temperature of the water at night. Her eyelids were partially open. Her lips were drawn back slightly, revealing the tops of her teeth. Someone remarked quietly, "It almost looks like she is still alive." The tank's interior showed chemical residue, a faint but present trace of bleach diluted over time. There were also plastic fibers consistent with a tarp or contractor bag stuck to the victim's skin and matted in her hair. Near the base of the tank, tucked between layers of decomposing organic material, technicians found something else. A broken fingernail still painted bright red. Underneath it, a tiny clump of human hair not matching the victim's color. Detective Grant paced the rooftop, gloves on, scanning the space. There were no surveillance cameras facing the upper access ladder, no door sensors, no motion detectors. "Whoever did this knew the layout," she muttered. "This was not random. They chose this spot." Back at the mobile lab unit, the forensics team laid out the evidence beneath bright fluorescent lights. Everything was labeled. Evidence A01, human torso with trauma. Evidence A02, red fingernail. Evidence A03, foreign hair sample. Evidence A04, chemical swab results from tank wall. Evidence A05, plastic fiber from victim's shoulder. DNA samples were expedited to the state lab. Preliminary analysis estimated time of death to be approximately 10 to 14 days prior, meaning the victim had likely been inside the tank for nearly 2 weeks, decomposing silently, while hundreds of residents continued their daily routines, unaware of the horror inches above them. As the building sat in silence that night, floodlights cast harsh beams across the rooftop, illuminating the now drained tank. Officers took turns guarding it. Every few minutes, one of them would glance toward it uneasily, as if expecting something to move. By midnight, the rooftop was silent again. But the mystery had only just begun. Who was the woman inside the tank? How had no one heard anything? And why had someone gone through the effort to hide a body in the very system meant to keep people alive? June 4th, 2025, day 1 of the investigation. Detective Lydia Grant stood over the stainless steel table inside the Lancaster County Coroner's office. The morgue was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigeration unit and the soft tapping of her pen against her notebook. The victim's partial remains had been cleaned, tagged, and preserved. The image was no less horrifying under fluorescent lights. The forensic pathologist began her report quietly. She was female, mid to late 20s, time of death approximately 12 days ago. There were no fingerprints to match. Her fingers were either removed or had decomposed beyond use. No wallet, no ID, no jewelry. But dental records revealed the first break in the case. 2 implants, 1 molar, 1 lateral incisor were matched through a nationwide dental registry. The woman's name was Alexandra Brielle Morgan, a 27-year-old administrative assistant who had been reported missing in York, Pennsylvania, just 40 miles away on May 24, 2025. Her file contained no criminal history. No known substance abuse. Single with no children. Last seen leaving her office after working late. She never arrived home. Her car, a white 2016 Honda Civic, was still missing. The question now was not just what had happened to Alexandra. It was, how did she end up inside a water tank at an apartment building she had no known connection to? June 5, 2025, Day 2. Detective Grant began her next steps, the way she always did, with the last known movements of the victim. Alexandra had clocked out from Garnet Logistics, her employer, at 6:42 p.m. on Friday, May 24th. Surveillance footage from the office parking lot showed her walking to her car alone. She waved goodnight to the security guard and disappeared off camera. But when Grant reviewed footage from the surrounding area, something stuck out. At 7:04 p.m., a dark SUV was seen trailing Alexandra's vehicle along Route 30. The driver of the SUV never passed her. Instead, it remained at an unchanging distance behind her for over 5 miles. Then both cars vanished from view. There were no traffic cams on the rural stretch of road where they disappeared. Phone records showed that Alexandra's phone had powered off or been disabled at 7:13 p.m. After that, nothing. No pings, no GPS, no bank activity. That is when Grant turned her attention to digital forensics. Alexandra's social media accounts had been deactivated, not deleted, but disabled manually shortly after her disappearance. Her emails had been cleared, her cloud storage wiped, and her personal laptop, which had been taken into evidence from her apartment, revealed something strange. A folder titled Journal Entries had been encrypted and recently accessed on May 24th, just hours before she vanished. Grant pushed harder. She had her team recover the deleted files using forensic software. The journal revealed fragments of a deeply private life. I think he knows I'm pulling away. He checks my messages when I sleep. If something happens to me, please tell my sister it was never her fault. Then the final line, if I ever go missing, start with him. The question was, start with who? June 6, 2025, Day 3. That was when they found the Civic. Abandoned in an industrial lot behind an old warehouse on the outskirts of Ephrata, a town just 15 minutes from Briar Ridge. The car was locked. The license plate had been removed. There were no fingerprints on the door handles. Inside the glove box, officers found a burnt receipt barely legible. With forensic treatment, the ink was recovered. Buchanan Hardware and Rental, May 25. Purchase industrial-grade bolt cutters, 2 contractor bags, bleach. Grant followed the address. The hardware store had cameras. The footage was grainy but clear enough. A man, late 30s, wearing a baseball cap, paying in cash. No audio. Grant took a screenshot. Her team began canvassing all recent missing person reports, restraining orders, and domestic disturbances tied to Alexandra's name. That is when they founded a complaint filed 9 months prior. It had never gone anywhere. No charges were pressed, no restraining order was issued. But Alexandra had reported a break-in to her apartment. She said she believed it was someone she had been dating, a man she had met online who became possessive and unpredictable. She never listed his name, but her sister remembered. Michael Dameron. A contractor, sometimes plumber, sometimes painter, always just passing through. He had met Alexandra at a hardware store in York, and within weeks had begun helping her with repairs around her apartment. According to her sister, Alexandra had once joked, "If anything happens to me, check the guy with the toolbox." Grant ordered a full background check. Michael Dameron had no social media, no consistent residence, and a phone number that had pinged just 1.2 miles from Briar Ridge at 2:46 a.m. on May 26th, 2 days after Alexandra vanished. The circle was closing, but Grant had no proof, yet only shadows. She needed something more, something to tie Michael not just to Alexandra, but to that rooftop tank. And what her team would uncover next would shatter everything. By the afternoon of June 7, 2025, Detective Lydia Grant had an uneasy certainty forming in her chest. The victim, Alexandra Morgan, had known her killer intimately, and the name Michael Dameron was rising from the shadows like something long buried. Michael had no criminal record, but there was a pattern. Over the next 12 hours, Grant's team pulled up 5 more women, all from various towns across Pennsylvania, who had reported odd break-ins, harassment, or intimidation involving a man matching his description. In every case, the man had inserted himself quickly into their lives as a helper, a handyman, or a romantic partner. And in each instance, he vanished without a trace once questioned. Michael Dameron lived in no fixed residence. He used burner phones, worked cash jobs, and stayed in motels under aliases. But his name popped up quietly in a maintenance log from April 2025 at none other than Briar Ridge Apartments. He had worked there briefly under a subcontractor fixing vent ducts and repairing leaking pipes. He knew the building, he knew the tank, he had keys. Grant sat with that knowledge in silence. Then she made the call. They found Michael Dameron at a cheap motel in Reading, Pennsylvania, just 30 minutes east of Lancaster. He answered the door wearing paint-stained jeans, a white undershirt, and sandals. He looked surprised, but not alarmed when the detectives showed their badges. "What's this about?" he asked. His voice was steady, too steady. Grant watched his eyes closely. "We're investigating the death of Alexandra Morgan." For the first time, his eyelids twitched, almost imperceptibly, but it was there. "Alex, she's dead. We'd like you to come with us," she replied. Tss. At the station, Michael kept calm for a while. He admitted to knowing Alexandra. They had dated briefly, but she had ended things. He claimed he had not seen her in weeks, and that they had parted on good terms. Grant slid a photograph across the table, a still from the hardware store. "This you?" He studied it too long, then shrugged. "Can't say, could be." She slid another photo forward, a blurry frame from a rooftop security camera. They had found it just hours earlier, captured from a neighboring building's fire escape cam. It showed a man-sized figure climbing the back ladder of Briar Ridge just after midnight on May 26th. That night, she said, your phone pinged 1.2 miles away. We pulled the tower logs. Michael sat back, his jaw clenched. His fingers twitched once on the table. "You think I put her there," he said, "in the tank." His voice had changed, no longer puzzled, no longer innocent. Controlled. Calm. Grant said nothing. She waited. Then softly, "She told someone you know, wrote it down. If I ever go missing, start with him." Michael blinked, once. Then he smiled, just barely. And for the first time he spoke a sentence that felt honest. She was not supposed to leave. The room chilled. Michael's confession came not in a flood, but in fragments. He sat for nearly 2 hours silent. Then suddenly he asked for water. When the officer brought it in, he stared at the bottle and whispered, "That's the same kind she drank from." Then he began to talk. It started with control, always did. He had met Alexandra in a parking lot, offered to help her with her flat tire. From there, he inserted himself into her life, doing chores, offering small gifts, fixing things she had never asked to be fixed. But Alexandra had resisted. She had boundaries. She pulled back. And that, he said, made him feel invisible. The night he took her, he said she was tired. She wanted to be alone. He showed up anyway, brought groceries. She told him to leave. She was not polite. Michael's voice grew quiet here. "She said I was nothing to her." According to his statement, he blacked out after that. Claimed not to remember the impact, just her body limp on the apartment floor. It was not supposed to go that far. He described the next 48 hours in methodical detail. How he drove her body in the trunk of her own car. How he returned to Briar Ridge, a place he knew well. How he brought her up the fire escape and hid her in the tank at 2:45 a.m., when he knew there would be no witnesses. "I thought the water would cover it up, that she would disappear." But Alexandra did not disappear. She surfaced. Even in death, she spoke. And the building, the tank, the terrible taste in the water, it all became a voice. A voice he could no longer silence. When the full confession came, it was not in the interview room. It happened hours later, after Michael Dameron had been processed, fingerprinted, and placed in a holding cell at the Lancaster County Detention Center. It was nearly 3:00 a.m. The lights buzzing overhead, the halls quiet, but for the distant echo of metal doors latching shut. A rookie corrections officer on night shift found Dameron sitting on the floor of his cell, legs pulled to his chest, rocking slowly. His face was pale. His shirt was soaked in sweat. When the officer asked if he was all right, Dameron did not answer. He just kept staring at the wall, whispering something. The officer stepped closer. "I buried her," Dameron murmured, but she kept floating back. Within minutes, Detective Lydia Grant was called back to the jail. What followed was a second statement, this time unprompted, unfiltered, and disturbingly lucid. Dameron sat across from her in the visitation room, no cuffs, no script. His voice was hoarse. His knees trembled under the table. "You want to know everything? Fine. I will tell you how it happened." He took a long breath, and then the dam broke. He said it began with something simple. A text message Alexandra sent him the night she died. "I think we need some space." That was all. But to Michael, it was a sentence soaked in rejection, disrespect, betrayal. He claimed he had given her everything: his time, his help, his loyalty. He had shown up for her when no one else had. And now she wanted space. He drove to her apartment just after midnight, using the spare key she had once foolishly allowed him to make. She was asleep. He let himself in, sat in the dark kitchen. He waited 2 hours, just sat, listening to the sounds of the refrigerator hum the pipes, clicking the wind, tapping the blinds. Then he walked into her bedroom. She woke up. They argued, quietly but bitterly. She told him to leave, called him unstable, told him she was going to block his number. He said the moment that changed everything came when she pointed to the door and said, "You are nobody to me." That sentence unraveled him. "It felt like my body went cold," he whispered. "Like everything in me shut down." He grabbed her arm. She screamed. He covered her mouth. She scratched him. He showed the scar on his forearm. He pushed her. She hit the corner of the dresser. The blood came quickly. Too quickly. She did not scream again. "I thought she would get back up," he said. I waited. She did not move. For 5 hours he sat beside her body. He considered calling the police. He considered turning himself in. Instead, at 5:47 a.m., he wrapped her in a sheet, put her in the trunk of her own car, and drove west. He picked Briar Ridge because it was familiar. He still had a set of backdoor keys from his subcontracting days. He remembered that the rooftop was unmonitored, that the tank lid was unlocked, that no one ever went up there. "I thought it was remote," he said. She would disappear in the system. But what haunted him, what kept him awake in motel rooms and made him throw out every bottle of water he touched, was what happened next. He said that every night he heard her, not in words, in drips, in pipes, in dreams. "When I closed my eyes, I could feel the water," he whispered. Like it was rising, like she was still there, waiting. The smell came back to him every morning, the weight of her body, the look on her face before she collapsed. "I thought if I buried it deep enough it would go away," he whispered. But it didn't. He broke down then, fully. Heaving sobs shook his frame. His fingers gripped the edge of the metal table as if trying to hold on to something solid, something real. But it was too late. He had buried a woman inside a place meant to nourish life. He had contaminated not just a tank, but a community, a family, a little girl who would never trust water from a faucet again. And the worst part was, he knew. He knew from the moment he lifted the lid of that tank that this was not hiding a mistake. It was sealing a grave, a final attempt to erase a life that dared to say no to him. The apartment was still, too still. June 14th, 2025, marked 20 days since Alexandra Morgan vanished, 11 since her body was discovered, and 1 since she was laid to rest. Her older sister Rebecca stood in the middle of Alexandra's living room, surrounded by silence. A cereal bowl sat untouched on the kitchen counter. A half-burned lavender candle lingered on the windowsill. The scent was faint now, overpowered by the sterile smell of cleaning agents. But Rebecca could still feel her sister here. It was in the small things. The house slippers by the door, the post-it note on the fridge, "Buy more coffee." The framed photo of the two of them at a beach in Cape May, wind in their hair, grinning. Now everything felt like a museum, preserved frozen, and waiting for someone who would never return. Rebecca was the one who had to identify Alexandra's remains. She had not spoken since the funeral, not really. Only nods. Only small movements. It was as if her voice had gone with her sister. She set down the grocery bags. Then instinctively, she reached for the faucet, but her hand froze. The running water, so ordinary, so everyday, now felt violated. Even though she knew it was safe, even though the health department had purged the entire system and replaced the rooftop tank, she could not make herself drink from the tap. Not anymore, not ever again. The Briar Ridge apartments remained closed indefinitely. Plastic sheets covered every entrance. A red sign stapled to the door read, "Unfit for habitation." Ordered closed by Lancaster County Health Dept. Tenants were relocated, some temporarily, some permanently. But many left behind furniture, clothes, keepsakes, unable to stomach the idea of touching what had been touched by death. The Whitaker family, including Maya, the 10-year-old girl who first noticed the taste, moved to a rental 20 miles away. Maya refused to drink water unless it came in a sealed bottle. She checked every bottle cap twice. Her mother caught her doing it again and again, even in the middle of the night. "It still smells," Maya whispered once, "even if they say it doesn't." In court, Michael Dameron pled guilty to first-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, and tampering with evidence. His sentencing hearing was quiet. No outbursts, no declarations of innocence. When asked if he wished to speak, he said only, "I am sorry, but I know it is not enough." The judge did not offer a lecture. Only a flat tone, a life sentence, and a note for the record that this was one of the most disturbing and calculated crimes the court has ever seen. Dameron was transferred to SCI Phoenix, a maximum security facility in eastern Pennsylvania. According to staff, he does not speak. He eats little. He flinches at the sound of running water. In Lancaster County, the scars remain. Local lawmakers introduced new safety regulations requiring that all rooftop water systems in apartment buildings statewide be equipped with sealed, locked access hatches and real-time camera monitoring. They called it Alexandra's Law. It passed unanimously, but it came too late. The town held a vigil for Alexandra 1 week after her funeral. Hundreds gathered at a nearby park, holding candles, setting floating lanterns onto the lake. Her sister stood at the microphone, voice cracking. My sister was smart, kind, quietly brilliant. She was not famous, not rich. She did not make headlines in life. But her name will not be forgotten, not because of what happened to her, but because of what she left behind, the courage to speak up when something feels wrong. Even if it is just the taste of water. The apartment remains untouched. Rebecca visits once a week. She waters the plants, straightens the pillows. She has not packed anything, not yet. Alexandra's bedroom door remains closed. Sometimes late at night, Rebecca dreams of her sister coming home, tired, smiling, keys in her hand. In the dream, nothing has happened. There was no tank, no missing posters, no call from the coroner. Just two sisters laughing in the kitchen, teasing each other about bad dates and soggy cereal. But then she wakes, and the world is quiet again. Too quiet.